This whole journey, this Gene Keys journey, this human journey is about reuniting the different aspects of self and the different aspects of the collective so that we can reunite with the Godhead. We ask for your grace, for your involution, for your power, for us to come and to meet you and to be able to fulfill our service on this planet. Thank you. Amen. Thank you guys for doing that with me. And I hope you feel the energy that we can put out into the collective when we come together and we do things like this. I recently did a video about fractals and about how the work that you do impacts everyone else on your fractal line. And ultimately, those three fractals even go back to one. So by doing our work, we do work for the collective, for the whole. What I want to talk about today is some wounding patterns. So this came from the weekend that I just spent with Richard, where he talked about the great change and the future human and what's coming. And one of the things that he talked about was kind of the human wounding patterns that we're going to feel and see both internally and externally. So our internal state, as well as the workings of what's happening in culture and society around the world. And so I'm going to talk about the individual wounding patterns that we're going to feel, the shadow state that picks up for us in our lives, the planetary wound that is tied to that individual state. So in other words, what we'll see in society and in culture at large through the collective lens. Then I've got how we can begin to heal that wound from an evolutionary standpoint, meaning what is it that we can do, and from an involutionary standpoint, meaning how is grace reaching down to help us through this process and transition. I'm going to start with the first wound, and this ties to the first line of your core wound, or excuse me, these tie to the lines of your core wound. So as you're looking at your profile, if you look at your core wound, you'll see a number that's got 2 digits and then, or sometimes 1 if it's 1 through 9, and then you'll see a period and then a number 1 through 6 after that period. And it's the number 1 through 6 that ties to this wound that I'm going to be talking about. Now, just because you have that wound in your profile, we all carry all of these wounds in different capacities. You're just going to feel one more than the other. So the first wound, individual wound, is repression. So what repression means at the core wound is this repression of this deep, deep, deep-seated fear that everything is going to fall apart, that you're not safe, that you're not okay. The tendency for the first line is to take things and to shove them down, to pretend like they don't exist at the shadow level. And so that is the repression, and it manifests for a lot of people as this low-level anxiety, or the word Richard uses in the 30-second gene key is actually panic. But it's not panic in a frantic sense. It's just this low-level panic or fear that something is going to go wrong. Like it can't be this simple, it can't be this easy, or even when it's hard, it's going to get worse, right? That's the first line take. And we really, as first lines, this is my wound here, we go large periods of our life pretending that it's not there and thinking that we somehow can work our way out of this wound, right? If I only have more money, if I only have more time, if I only have the right partner, all of these things are manifestations of trying to fix this fear. But the reality of the situation is, this is the core wound, and it comes from being separate from God. It comes not from anything that happened in our life, no trauma, nothing like that. And it's not to say that those things didn't happen also and potentially contribute to this. However, this is something that even if your parents were perfect and your life was perfect, you would still have this deep-seated, unsettled feeling. And the shadow state that brings up is, oh, excuse me, terror. So we're just constantly fearful that things are going to fall apart. And on the planetary level, what that terror leads to is invasion. So this is where we see this first line energy is where we see countries wanting to take the resources of other countries. So because we have this deep-seated fear, we think if we just have more, then I can protect myself from it. And so in that way, we try and seek more by invading somebody else so that I can take their resources and apply them to my problem. Of course, that doesn't fix the problem. Even with more resources, the fear would just find a new place to go. And so what we need to do is learn from an evolutionary standpoint, meaning what can I do to help to begin to ease the pain of that wound? And what a first line needs is honesty. First with self. You've got to be honest with yourself that this is something that you feel, like it or not. And it is something that you're stuck with. The point of the gene keys is not to make this feeling go away. Instead, it's to press it into service, right? It's to use it at the gift level. Now, when we get to the city, all bets are off, right? But when we get to the city, you're not you anymore. So I'm speaking specifically to the gift here. We've got to learn how to press this fear into service. And the first thing that we need to do as a first line is just acknowledge that the fear is there and not try and do something to distract ourselves away from it. In fact, we've got to turn towards it. And it's in turning towards it that we will feel what we need to do with it. By keeping it in the corner and pretending it doesn't exist, we're missing out on so much potential information of how we're meant to show up in service in the world. Remember, your core wound is the same sphere as your vocation. And so that means that your deepest wound, once transmuted, is the thing that drives your service out into the world. And then the involutionary current that heals this first wound is divine will. That's the 40th gene key. And I'm pulling these from a teaching called the 7 Sacred Seals, which is actually a teaching that this is my work right now. I'm deep in the 7 Sacred Seals work, and I cannot recommend it enough. It is incredibly beautiful, incredibly powerful. I will tell you, it is the more mystical arm of the gene keys, and it's the deeper arm of the gene keys, and there is a certain level of development and spiritual growth that is required before these seals will open to you. So this is typically something that I recommend once you've been with the gene keys for a year or two, then it might be time to start to take in these 7 Sacred Seals teachings. Okay, so divine will, how does that help? Well, we're repressing this deep-seated fear. But what if there was no reason to have that fear in the first place? What if everything that's happening in the world around us is a manifestation of divine will, the good, the bad, the ugly? If you understand that at a deep, deep level, then you have nothing to be afraid of anymore. So in that way, when we align to divine will, then we can just be vessels for love and allow that light to pass through us and move out into the world. And we have nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. And this is the value of believing in a spirit and in reincarnation and in knowing that we're going back to somewhere that is beautiful. So even in death, we're safe. Any questions on that first wound down the line here? You can unmute yourself or you can type it in. Renee, I see a hand up.
Hey Jay, I'm just not. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Sorry, all these
It's
things
okay.
are
Take your
popping up.
time.
Turn off the settings. Okay. Can you hear me?
I can. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'll just say hey.
Hi. Good to see you again. It's been a while.
So like when you said about the so you know what I'm experiencing, like an angst. So I call it like an existential, like I guess pain, and it's really weird because it comes up occasionally, but I'm very much aware of it now, more so because I'm at a subtle level with this. So when you mentioned about the regression, or can you level terror? It's like it's like an angst that's kind of like tied into maybe that terror piece. So when you say terror, so is it a texture? Because I know for me, things are no longer like, oh, it's an emotion. So I equate things now to texture.
Got it.
So when I feel that sense of existential angst, I call it,
yeah,
I've gotten familiar with it, not in a way where, it happens all the time, but when it does show up. So when you mentioned the terror, I'm just really saying thank you for that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I'm in this alone. And when I hear either your messages, it's just nice to know, like, okay, the terror or, existential angst, I call it. But anyway, thank you so much, Jay.
You're welcome. Yeah. And in the way that I feel this, because I'm similar, I have different ways of feeling into things. And for me, this feels like you turn on the TV back in the day and there's not actually a channel there, that's static. That's what it feels like inside of me, to give you a visual or like an energy state. It's like a staticky TV that just makes me deeply uncomfortable.
Yes. That's a good way to explain it too. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Carol.
Hi. What was the gene key that the divine will is associated with, please?
It is number 40.
Number 40. Thank you very much. I missed that.
You're welcome. Yes, ma'am. Any other questions? Yes, Val. You're muted, my dear.
Did you just go over the first line, but go through all 6 of them?
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to go all the way through, but that was just the first one.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Chris, yes. You are still muted, my brother. No, do you see it? There we go. Yeah.
I'm rough with the technology.
That's okay. No worries.
I had a question. I think you may have answered it, but I figured since it might be something other people have, where do you find your core wound? Is that, you mentioned the vocation and not.
Yeah, it's that same space. So if you just have like a printed profile, it'll only say vocation there, but it's the same gene key and the same line is your core wound. It's a different keynote. So you see like where it says line, whatever, and a word next to it.
Yeah.
It's different from that, but the keynotes that I'm going over and this individual section here, that's going to be the keynote that you'll see. If you go back online, you can actually toggle to just the Venus sequence shows.
Okay.
And when you do that, that's when you'll see this.
So mine says line 5. So that's essentially what this is going to relate to, what you're talking
about. Exactly. You got it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Keisha, yes.
I am curious about how we find more information on the 7 sacred seals.
So you can go to the Gene Keys website and click courses. And one of the courses that they have there is 7 sacred seals. So if you want to go deep into it, that's where I would point you. If you're just looking for a broad and general understanding, in the 22nd Gene Key, he goes into the 7 sacred seals there.
Okay, that's so, I've done so many of the courses, I've never seen that one on there. I don't know how I missed it.
The
It's
book is
really
on Amazon as well, because I just
Okay.
started
Yeah.
it recently. Yep.
I've,
I was gonna
I've gotten
say-
a little bit into it. I have the 22nd as my pearl, and I've done a little bit, but I don't know how I missed that course available.
it's really awesome. I
Yeah.
really, really love it.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you're going to do it, and this goes for across the board, if you guys can remember, I have an affiliate link that I can share that won't cost you anything extra, that helps me out. So Keisha, if you end up doing it and you want that, just let me know.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Perfect.
Mhm.
And no pressure also, by all means,
No.
only if it makes sense.
I just finished the guides program also. And so I'm trying to understand how all of these, just freshly, like 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So I'm trying to figure out all of the things. It's kind of embarrassing to me that I didn't even see the 7 sacred seals, of course, because I've actually searched for it. So,
I mean,
okay.
like Richard talks about, this is such a synthesis of things that end up winding in so many different connections and connecting in different ways. And there's so many different ways into this wisdom. So
Yeah.
I get
Well,
it.
I'm glad I came across you because I appreciate how you simplify things.
Oh, thank
helpful.
you. Thank you. Yeah. So at this real quick in between lines here, at the weekend, so many people came up to me and just screamed, Jay. And like, it was shocking to me, the level of people that knew who I was. And the comment over and over again was like, you make this so much more palatable for me, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And so I contemplated this a lot. And where I landed is Richard, in his poetic nature, is really, really good at speaking directly to your causal body, directly to your soul, which bypasses understanding.
Mhm.
So people are trying to listen to Richard and get like a firm grasp on what he's saying, but that's not how he speaks. He's a poet at heart. So what he's doing is allowing the energy to pass below.
Mhm.
Whereas I've realized that I am much better at talking directly to the intellect,
Mhm.
which I'm actually struggling with a little bit because I think we're all way too intellectual as is. And so now I'm like, well, am I like doing the wrong thing by talking to the intellect? Or is that going to allow the gate to open for this wisdom to come down into people's hearts when it is time for it to come down?
It
But
is.
that's where I
Well,
land.
That's your gift.
it is your gift. I have the intellect as my life's work shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's why I was so excited when I came across you recently, because I need that kind of communication. Sure.
Thank
So
you.
very much appreciated.
Yeah. And my intention, if you watch the moon video, I kind of hinted at you can feel this internal shift. And some people reached out and were like, please don't stop doing these. Don't stop talking.
Mhm.
And it's not my intention to stop talking, but I am going to work on being a little bit softer. Like we said, may kindness resound through our voice, a little bit softer and maybe a little bit fewer words. And we'll see where that gets us, which is a struggle for me. I recently listened to a podcast with a man named David White. And if you're not familiar with him, you should be. He's a poet who's absolutely incredible. And he got asked to write a piece, and it had to be 300 words. And he's like, are you kidding me? An Irishman is just warming up after 300 words. Like, how can I get this done? So that's how I feel sometimes. Okay. Any other questions on the first line before we carry on? Excellent. Okay, so our second line wound here is denial. So the second lines, where the first line internalizes, the second line casts out, right? Second lines see themselves as like being really flowy at a higher frequency, really flowy, and it's keynoted the dancer, and you just are kind of like everything comes easy for you. And so when something doesn't come easy, when it's a struggle, when it's hard, second lines typically go into this denial and say, I'm flowy, I'm easy, it must be you. You're the problem. Right? So they're taking this wound and they're putting it out on the world. And that might not resonate for you if you're a second line. And you got to remember here, the keynote is denial. So I need you to really take this in and be open to this as a possibility. And it doesn't mean that you are mean to people, right? Or that it is like a direct, our ego finds very subtle ways to express these things, I guess is what I'm saying. So you really need to be open and be aware and looking for this wound of denial. And what that denial does is it puts us in a state of rage. So we get this deep-seated anger because we're blaming somebody else. So if you look at all of the gene keys, they have a repressive and a reactive tendency. Second lines are going to be more reactive more often than not. And that reactive energy is an anger energy. Now, I went a lot of my adult life thinking that I didn't have anger. And man, was I kidding myself. I have second lines and radiance and purpose, right? I'm a 6'2". And what I realized is that when I flipped the word anger for the word annoyed, all of a sudden that totally opened up to me of like, wow, all of those annoyances, I'm mad at this thing or this person. That's why I'm annoyed. And so maybe that might be helpful for some of you that deal with this wound, is kind of, that's why language is so powerful, seeing it through a slightly different lens. And that rage, what that turns into on a planetary level is violation. So this is where we see some pretty gnarly things. I was in the Marine Corps. Humans do some really messed up stuff when we're one tribe against another tribe. And that violation, you know, I'm reading the Bible right now, cover to cover. And in the Old Testament, so many times people went into different cities, raped women, took things, you know, all of that is this energy of violation. Because I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm going to take it out on you. So we invade and then we violate. And you can start to see how there's going to be a story that builds with these different lines. And the evolutionary thing that we must do as second lines is find ease. We've got to take a deep breath. We've got to slow down. And we've got to trust in what's coming to us. The anger comes when we don't trust the situation that presents itself in our life. Going back to divine will, if we know that this is divine will, this thing is happening to us for a purpose, then we know that there's nothing to get angry about. And so we've got to find this flowiness, this ease, this gentleness with self and with others. And from an involutionary standpoint, what opens this up is omniscience. So omniscience, if I know, right, if I'm everywhere and I know what's inside me and what's inside you, well, then I can no longer cast this out, right? I can see in you. And if I can see in you, then I know what's in me. And so omniscience allows us to not place blame, to not go into denial, to be able to see the whole picture and everything that's happening for us, not to us, for us. Yes, Lena.
Just wanted to comment on the second line in the core, because it's my my line there, and I had some crazy realizations this year about this, and it was so astounding how deeply and brutal I'm projecting onto others when I feel stiff or attacked, and it was crazy to see that, oh, that's all me, it's all me outside. I'm really do not see the other person, I see just me. And before that I thought, yeah, you are so stressed or something like that, but it's all me. It was so interesting, and so sort of such a spiritual experience to suddenly see that it's all me. It was crazy somehow.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very typical experience for the second line. Is it's like this aha moment of like, oh my God, it's me the entire time. How did that happen? I don't understand. So definitely I resonate with that also. And it's kind of man, I'm drawing a blank on the word right now, but you know, it's said all the time that we're just a mirror for one another. But when you actually take that in, like that is a deep, deep, deep reality. When somebody triggers something in you, it is you, it is in you. Because if you choose to engage in that thing, you are sabotaging yourself, right? You're choosing to follow the anger train. It's a choice. Thank you for sharing that. I know, I appreciate it. Any other questions on this second line?
I just want to make a comment about, because I'm a second line there, and hearing you talk about the denial and blaming others. I internalize everything pretty much, but I can see now that where I've said, you know, it's the world, I'm in the wrong world. No, it's not that I identified other people as particularly being wrong. I'm pretty unconditionally loving in that way, but it's like I'm in the wrong world. Just take me out of here.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, I didn't recognize that. So I appreciate that point of view.
Absolutely. And on a subtle level, that's almost a blaming or a denial of God itself.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. It's that lack of trust that, you know, God knows what is right, you know. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Beautiful realization. Thank you. Rachel asked the question, does this second line come with overthinking? So at a shadow frequency, every line comes with overthinking. That's kind of one of the indicators that you're in the shadow, is that you're totally looping around in your head and you have not allowed your body to settle and to come down. I've got a video rolling around in the back of my brain here where I think a big aversion to people dropping down into their body is that it is a place that we lose control, right? In our mind, we get to control our thoughts, but our body, our emotions, on some deep level, we lose a deep sense of control there. And it's stepping into the unknown, because it's also, our bodies are constantly shifting and constantly changing. And so to ground yourself down into your body requires this letting go, this release. And so, yes, it's all overthinking at the shadow frequencies. You're welcome. You're welcome, Rachel. Anything else questions wise before I move on? Okay, so moving on now to our third line. The individual wounding pattern is shame. So as you know, or maybe you don't know, but third lines operate in the world essentially on a trial and error operating system. So they're going to do lots of different things. They're going to try lots of different ways of being and living in the world. And oftentimes, all the time, some of those ways don't end up working out. And sometimes they can harm ourselves and they can harm other people. And so the third line starts to internalize that shame. Another really common thing with third lines is they look around at the world and they don't understand how everyone else seems so stable and they seem so all over the map. And so they get this thought of like, why can't I just get my shit together? And so third lines oftentimes will carry shame around not being in the same place as their peers, which PS, that's also very common with 6 lines. And what you'll see is that lines 1 and 4, lines 2 and 5, and lines 3 and 6 have a deep resonance with one another. So that third line shame is this feeling that there's something wrong with you. So there's a woman I love, Brene Brown, which if you're not familiar with her work, you should definitely check it out. And I love how Brene Brown separates guilt and shame. People, or in her terms, guilt is feeling badly for something that you did. Shame is feeling badly for a way that you are. Right? So it's a deeper, it doesn't have to do with anything that you did necessarily. It's like, man, why am I like this? That's this deep sense of shame. And on the shadow state that comes from this is this panic, which I know I kind of referenced the low level panic for the first line, but this is not that low level panic. This is, oh my God, panic. This is, things are not okay. This is, I need to run away, right? This is too much for me. Like, I need to get out of here. That is the third line wound. They look around and they just are like, there is way too much happening. I can't handle this. I'm panicking and I need to go. And what that leads to on a planetary level is migration. So this is where we see entire groups of people moving across the world, needing to move across the world. It's what leads, and sometimes this can be a positive thing and sometimes not so much, right? It depends on why that migration is showing up. But this is what leads to people moving. And from an evolutionary standpoint, what we must have as a third line is humor. You've got to learn to laugh at yourself. All right, all these experiences that you had, in hindsight, you look back and you're just like, oh my gosh, how did I miss the joke? Like, how did I not see it in the moment? But it's not a beating myself up. How did I not see it? It's like, oh, I missed the punchline. This is ridiculous. And so we have to learn how to laugh at ourselves. When we laugh at ourselves, then that's externalizing essentially the shame. You're processing it in the moment instead of keeping it in. We're just like, oh man, like I did it again. How ridiculous am I? And then from an involutionary standpoint, what we need here is love. And this is universal love. This is the love of God, agape, if you will, or maybe you prefer the term light, or the term the universe, or God, right? All of these are saying the same thing. It's this deep-seated energy that cares for you and knows you and loves you and is guiding you and is present for you. And that universal love just cracks our heart open. And shame cannot be present in the company of love. Even when we think as above, so below, if we think about when you feel ashamed for something in your life and somebody that you love comes to you and just engulfs you in a big hug and says it's okay and things are going to work out and this isn't forever, even just that melts it away. Now take that and magnify it times infinity, and that's the love of God that wraps around you and helps you through this shame.
May I say something?
Yes, of course.
Okay. I have to thank you so much because you just solved my big question mark. All my life, I'm wondering why I feel so unsettled. You know, everyone else seems to have their own like routine and daily life they go with, and I feel like I don't have any of that. And so I'm going and moving everywhere all the time, traveling few months, coming back and moving again, and always having, mainly when I'm back home, I have this feeling of being out of place, of being, I don't know, I don't really have like a structure. I don't even really have like a proper job or something. Like, I do many things all the time and I change and oh my God. And so sometimes I feel like, what's wrong with me? I mean, everyone else has, managed to have like routines and things, they regularly do. And I get annoyed, I get bored, and I don't want to do it. And at the same time, I feel like if they do that, maybe should I also do that? But now, so many times, because now I have, a reason.
Yes. I guarantee you the other third lines in this room are thinking the exact same thing.
Oh, that's unbelievable. So many thanks. You are so good at what you do. So good.
Thank you. Thank you, my dear. Thank you.
Now I have to leave you. I will rewatch this. Now I have another appointment, but I will rewatch
Okay.
and record it and transcribe.
Thank you for being here, Francesca. We'll see you next time.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Andre, yes.
So what Francesca just said kind of hits the mark, because all of my life I've never felt like I belonged in Toronto. Like something felt alien. Like I just couldn't put words to it. It was a feeling. And then like I feel like my home is in San Diego, and I know what you mentioned about it could be a positive thing to move, right? So I'm actually heading there again for Christmas time, and I'm just going to be kind of just chilling, and I'm going to actually just be sitting and just feeling a lot of things. That this trip is more just to be in the now and really like take what you just said about like, is this really like my mind saying this? Is this my body saying this? Like, and when you said like us like not having shit figured out, this is what I always felt, because with my peers, like they've already have like the wife, the kid, the job, blah blah blah. And as for me, as you know, entrepreneur journey, stepping into that role, right? Coming from IT background for like 15 years and leaving that behind to, doing this, it's fucking scary, So like what you just said just kind of hit the mark. So thank you for that.
Beautiful. You're welcome, brother. Yeah, it's when we are able to have, one of the things I love most in life is when somebody can express, like when I hear a term for something that I feel inside, but I've never been able to externalize it or verbalize it or see it. I love that feeling, and I'm hearing that maybe this is doing that for some of you guys, and I'm really, really grateful for that. Any other questions on this third line? Renee, yes.
Sorry, mistake again. Hitting the wrong.
Okay, no worries. Anybody else on line 3? Okay, so we'll move on to line 4 now. I'm actually going to erase these top 3. Is that okay? Does anybody need these? Okay. So our 4th line individual wound is rejection. So line 1 internalizes and tries to repress this fear. Line 2 casts that fear out onto somebody else. Line 3 is ashamed for having cast that energy out. And then line 4 fears the rejection that happens because of that shame. So there are so many different stories and levels of understanding when you really start to dig into this wisdom and let it come all the way into you. That's the power of contemplation. You start to see all the patterns. And I'm actually going to talk about the 7 sacred seals, and there's a pattern in those opening to us. So that's why I really encourage you, take your time with these things. Let them in. You're not just reading words, you're building connections. So rejection, I'm terrified that I'm not going to be accepted. And it comes from hundreds of thousands of years ago, that when we weren't part of the tribe, we couldn't survive. And where that shows up as a shadow state is hatred. So where this hatred comes from is, it's basically a preemptive strike, in that I'm fearful that you're going to reject me, but I'm not going to give you that opportunity. I'm going to hate you first. So by me hating somebody else, they can't reject me. I don't like them anyway. That's the energy that the 4th line deals with here. It's this coldness, it's this shutting off to others, which is crazy because in the higher frequencies, 4th lines are all about connection and community and being around people. But at a lower frequency, you're worried that that connection is going to break your heart. And so you become cold, you put up these walls to avoid this feeling of rejection and ultimately manifesting as this hatred. And what that leads to on a planetary level wow, that's pretty messy. Sorry. It says colonization. So colonization, which is, I don't like, right? I've migrated. Remember the line before here, the story. I've migrated and now I'm around these other people and I don't like them. So what am I going to do? I'm going to colonize. I'm going to make them be like me. Because if they're like me, well, then again, I can't be rejected, right? They're now part of my group. And so we force them to do things that they don't want to do. We force them to be a certain way. We colonize. And to go back to that story, we invade, and then we violate, we migrate, and then we colonize. And so you can also start to see the pattern between lines 1 and 2, lines 3 and 4, and another between 5 and 6. So there's these resonances all over the place. Now, to heal this wound from an evolutionary standpoint, what's required is gentleness. So that's a gentleness first and foremost with self. It's a gentleness and understanding that when you feel that freeze, which is classic 4th line, this emotional freezing, you've got to parent yourself back to thawing your heart. You're the only one that can do that. In our society, a lot of times, the idea is put in our head that it is our partner's role to help us, or our friend's role, or our whatever, to allow your heart to start to thaw. Most often, though, it's that primary partner. But you're just setting them up to fail because it has nothing to do with what they did. So they can't know or feel what you're feeling. So they're not going to do exactly what you need to come back. And then that furthers this loop, right? You feel rejected because of that. And so we start to spiral downward. So instead of putting it out on another, we've got to learn, what are the things that I need to do to begin to unfreeze my heart? And we can't force this. Sometimes it's just patience and it's just time. But what you're looking for is just an ember in the space of your heart, right? Just the most faint, subtle feeling of warmth or of peace or of ease. And once you feel that, you can just so gently hold it and cradle it and blow air on it with your awareness. And gradually it will start to expand and grow, and you'll feel this softening of the walls that you put up around your heart. And as a fourth line, it's important that you communicate that to your partner or to the relationships that you have. Like, hey, I can feel that this wall is up right now, and it's nothing that you did. Even if it is something that you did, going back to the second line, remember that is a wound that you're carrying. And it's just saying, I'm not shutting you off forever. I just need some time to be able to bring these walls down so that I can come back and re-engage. And in that way, we don't go into what's called the Eden loop, which is a spiral into now you've triggered the other person. And from an involutionary standpoint, what we need is an epiphany. An epiphany is the 43rd gene key. And this manifests in lots of different ways, this epiphany. Manifests differently for different people. But essentially, it is this explosion of all of a sudden being able to see divinity in everything and everyone at every moment. And of course, if you believe that to be true, then how could we possibly hate somebody if they are just another version of the divine? Our heart just melts open, and we understand that everything they did is coming from a place of their wounding and is an expression of divine will. So the shadow state for this 43rd gene key is deafness. And that deafness isn't because you can't hear. It's deafness because you're so busy. You're running around constantly, nonstop, trying to do and learn and figure out and control. And the gift there is insight. So when we slow down and we tune in, we begin to let these insights trickle in to our being. And eventually what happens is this total frame shift. This what's called a merge, right? We have pause, pivot, merge. And that merge is like all of a sudden I have a totally different lens for seeing the world. And this is ultimately the epiphany of our third line. It's the epiphany of love. At a deep, deep level, seeing love in everything. Let's open up this one for questions. Fourth line. Is this one for real, Renee?
Yeah. I just
Okay,
want to
what you
say
got? What
beauty.
you got?
Also, beauty is like an epiphany. Because I see
Yeah.
beauty in every, like that. I mean, yeah, that's all. Beauty.
Absolutely. Beauty is
Yeah.
something that is bringing me to tears every day right now. And I'm
Me
so grateful
too.
for
That's
it.
my, like, I have like different things, like different stages. And right now I'm in that beauty. Like everything is like, and I live around a lot of nature too. So that's helpful.
Yeah, I love it so much. And for me, what it is this state where I see the amazingness, the quintessence, the just this ecstasy, and at the same time, simultaneously, the suffering and the depth of despair. And it's both of those things coming together that just like brings me to my knees. And it's a beautiful, beautiful feeling. It's utter bliss. And the smallest things can bring us into that state when our heart begins to open. These used to come like few and far between for me. And I'm not kidding when I say it's every day right now.
Yeah. Even my tears. Like today, you know, I had a moment and it was not, you know, because I'm very much sometimes the suffering and seeing the beauty in it, like you just mentioned, and tears were falling. And then it was like, wow, this is just so beautiful. So I'm always like, beauty is the first thing that comes up now, even when I'm, you know, going through a moment, you know, it's amazing. It's so amazing. So thank you so much, Jay.
Yes, yes, welcome. Yeah, this feels like an apt time to remind everyone the teaching of the Gene Keys is that suffering is grace. Got to take that in on a deep, deep, deep level.
That's the seventh seal too, sacred seal.
It is. And one
I'm
day,
on that one. I'm reading that for a month. I'm trying to read one for a month and see. Yeah, may not get to the whole 8 pages or whatever. It's a smaller book, but you know, like really trying to embody it. And every time I'm learning something new, I reference the you know, my profile is deep. So anyway.
yeah, my intention is to spend probably a full year with those teachings. It's not something that comes quickly. My understanding is that these seals don't open when you listen. There's audio that's associated. It's essentially what he calls an invocation of opening each seal. Okay. And one of the things that he mentions is that these seals open to you when they are ready to open to you. And you'll know that it's time to move on to the next seal when you are like, when you feel it, right? Deeply in your body, not when you have a logical understanding of it.
Yeah.
You feel it.
Makes sense. Thank you for that.
Val.
Yeah, so I am a line 4, and I'm heavy with the 2s and the 4s. I've got 4 of each. I have no 1s and no 3s. So the irony, or what I find interesting here, is like when you said denial, I was like, oh yeah, I've done that. I've done plenty of that, you know. And then rejection and that fear, I'm like, oh yeah. But the other 2, just when you said shame, I was all, oh, like just you know, because it does not resonate with me. It's so interesting, you know. But I do have to say, this is really mind opening for me, and kind of, I don't know, it makes me feel a little bit proud, to be honest, of my life's journey, because I stopped using that word hate, and I started moving away from that, like, I don't know, my adolescence. You know, I was like, no, and I can see all of what you're saying there, you know, that I have been already on that journey, and that I'm reaching that epiphany of love in humanity, just in general, you know, just, you know me. That's I'm just, so I just feel like, wow, it's so crazy when you have already been on this spiritual journey for so long and working so hard on yourself, but then to see how it reflects even still the Gene Keys, like even if you've already worked through it, it just resonates so deeply.
Yes.
So beautiful. Yeah, it's just amazing.
It is. I agree. I know I've been talking to the people that I work with, like, I really feel, for whatever reason, this has come into me so deeply relatively quickly, right? It's only been just over a couple of years that I've been like really into the Gene Keys, but I know it already, right? That's why it's like I'm remembering it, not learning it. Like I really feels that way.
Exactly. Yeah, I can see that. And I love seeing you. Like your growth in all of this has been just so amazing from the first wisdom call to now.
Yeah.
So, it's just so beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Carol, my dear.
Hi, thank you. A couple of days ago, I looked at my family's chart, and I have in my core wound 70. No, hold on. What is it? I've forgotten. Excuse me.
That's okay.
47 fourth line.
Okay. So we've got, for those that are uninitiated, it is transmutation, transfiguration, and what's the shadow?
Oppression.
Oppression. Thank you.
Okay. So the amount of oppression and rejection has gone in our family in one form or another. And when I read that, I just went, wow, we are all feeling so vulnerable.
Yeah.
And the consequences of actually projecting that out and not accepting it for herself is just heartbreaking. But I'm also a 6'2", so it's kind of like, yeah. Oh, heavy.
The good news is that in all of these things, in order to change a family dynamic, a relationship dynamic, and eventually a whole society at large, it takes one side, right? One person. And in that, if you show up and are able to return non-love with love, it just short circuits everything, right? And all of a sudden the anger that somebody held and the expectation that you're going to lash back out at them, and then you don't, and they're like, I don't know what to do now, right? And so it only takes one side.
Yeah, takes time, but one side.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Anything else, guys, with this fourth line? Okay. So we'll move on to line 5 now. And the individual wound of line 5 is guilt. Now, I already referenced kind of how Brene Brown sees the difference between guilt and shame, but the Gene Keys actually takes it a step further in talking or describing about what this guilt is. This guilt, like shame, was personal, right? Because it's the third line, and lines 1, 2, or 3 are personal. Line 4, 5, and 6 are transpersonal, right? They're outside of you. And so this guilt isn't from anything that you did. This is the guilt of humanity. This is looking around and thinking, how are people still starving? How are we still having wars? How are there people still on the streets? It's that guilt. It's this just extreme amount of karma that's held in our DNA. And it's our role as everyone that's on this call. You're on this call because you're on my fractal line. You're on this call because you are called to growth and to help guide us through this transition. And so it is our role to start to unwind this collective cosmic karma. And it's not fair. It's not fair, right? We've all had enough big and little T trauma in our life. We've all had plenty to deal with. But what you'll realize when you're able to start to open your heart is that your heart will open wide enough to handle whatever comes your way. And because of that, God knows that you're somebody that can take an unfair share of this collective karma and transmute it for the whole. So it's a deep, deep, deep piece of work. And the work that you're doing is healing up and down, not just forward, but back to the past. And so just remember that as these things come up, remember that it's not yours. A lot of it is not yours. And when we're able to see it that way, it gives us a little bit of space. And it allows us to see ourselves as the hero or the heroine in the movie. And doing the difficult things that need to be done so that there can be happily ever after. So the shadow state that shows up with this fifth line, it's actually delusion. So delusion here, fifth lines are very powerful beings. They're very magnetic. And the archetype of the delusional tyrant, which I'm going to get to that in a second, but that is the fifth line archetype at the shadow frequency. It's a delusion because we think that the way humanity has been is the way that humanity is supposed to be. And so the actions and the steps that we take further perpetuate this, the delusion of the Maya, right? The illusion of everything that's happening around us. We think that by taking more power, that we can then control things into shifting. The delusion is, or the truth is, you don't have any power. The power is in God and it is playing through you, right? And so it's in seeing that. And I want to be careful with my language. You do have personal power also. But you get what I'm saying here, yeah? Like it's this deep, deep sense that you can do this on your own. And on a planetary level, what that leads to is tyranny. I already hinted at that. So it's the dictator. It's I'm going to fix this. Or at the very least, I'm going to fix this for me. Right? That's how a lot of fifth lines think at the shadow frequency. And unfortunately, how a lot of our world leaders think currently in this moment right now. The evolutionary healing of this wound comes from forgiveness. We've got to forgive humanity for what it's done. We've got to understand that what has happened on some level is part of the plan. I know that that is so hard to hear and so hard to accept, right? Everything that's happening in the world right now, everything that happened in the race wars in the US, Vietnam, World War II, World War I, you name it, right? All of these just atrocities. But when you start to feel this come into your being, it goes back to all of those other lines, right? This sense that it's all divine will and that everyone is doing their best. And we're all acting out our part in the plan. We can't not do that. Which hopefully gives you a sense of peace and a sense of ease. And at the involutionary standpoint, interestingly, it's also forgiveness. So this is the forgiveness of how we respond to the things that God has put in our life. Right? We don't get to control. I think a lot of people think of will as controlling what's happening around them, right? But will is controlling our internal state, deciding on how we're going to respond. And God is like, I teed this up for you so that you could learn this beautiful lesson, and you decided to turn your back to it and do this thing. Lucky for us, God's heart, like our heart, just keeps opening and just keeps inviting us back and keeps forgiving us. And so this is the fourth gene key, actually, which its shadow keynote is intolerance, and the gift is understanding. So you can see how the intolerance comes from not recognizing or realizing that everyone is enacting their part of God's plan. And if I don't see that, then I'm not going to be tolerant to your behavior. At the very best, you might tolerate it, which even that is not what we're looking for here. Right? What we're looking for is understanding and forgiveness. And so understanding isn't about being tolerant. It's about understanding that we're all part of this divine story. And what that person did is part of their path, and it helps them get closer to God. Any questions on our fifth line? Nailed that one. All right, let's go. Give it another second or two, just in case somebody's shy. Yes, Val. Oh, no, that was a clap. Okay, thank you. Okay, then let's close it out here. We've got one more line to do, which is this sixth line. And the individual wound here is the wound of separation. I feel this one, even though I'm a first line here in this sphere, I feel this one very, very deeply because I have 6 lines pretty much everywhere else. And so this separation is like intimately familiar to me. This is a feeling that for some reason you're different than everybody else, right? Remember how I said the third line and the 6th line are resonant with one another, and the third line feels that way because their life is in shambles and everybody else's life feels really solid? Well, the 6th line is a similar feeling, but not because their life is in shambles, but just because there's this sense of like being different than everyone else. There's this sense of the gift of the 6th line is that you're able to take in the whole picture and you're able to see it all. But what that leads to is, because you can see it all, it's separate from you to be able to see that. And so we don't involve ourselves in what we're seeing. We keep it at arm's length, arm's distance. And so it leads to this deep feeling of separation of like, why? Why doesn't anybody get me? Why don't I fit in anywhere? Why doesn't anybody understand? And the shadow state that comes up from this 6th line is annihilation. That's a big word, annihilation. This is how Nazi Germany happened. That's what I mean by annihilation. Right? The rest of the world for quite a while, until it got so bad that we had to turn towards it. But for quite a while, we said, not my problem. That's the indifference. This is how genocide happens. And it's because we don't feel with compassion what's happening to these people because we feel separate. And if we would just include ourselves, we could see the damage that it's doing, and we would step up and do something about it. Oh, I lied. Apologies. That's actually planetary. I skipped one. Sorry about that. So the planetary wound is annihilation. The shadow state here is indifference, which hopefully still makes sense, right? We're indifferent internally. So we're separate from the world. And because of that separateness, we become indifferent. And that indifference is what leads to annihilation, right? We just keep ourselves at arm's distance. From an evolutionary standpoint, what we need to heal that wound is care. We need to start to care again. We need to start to pull ourselves back into what's happening. And trust me, I know how hard it is as a 39-year-old sixth line who is what's called on the roof in the human design language, right? From 29 to 51 or 52 years old, sixth lines want nothing to do with society, essentially. So I feel it. And I'm here right now involving myself because I know the value in doing that. Trust me, I wish that I could just read all day and take all of this stuff in and keep it to myself. But the other side of the sixth line is that I have such an urge to help people to see what I see. From an involutionary standpoint, what we need is truth. So truth is the 63rd gene key. Doubt, inquiry, truth. Capital T truth is silent. It's the divine mind. The atmic body, if you're familiar with that term. And by seeing that truth, we can pull ourselves back down into the world. We can see the story of these 7 sacred seals. So the 7th seal, I'm going to do them in reverse now so you can feel this at a deep level. The 7th seal ties to the monadic body, which is what encompasses everything. Okay, so there's monadic in reverse, monadic, atmic, buddhic, causal, mental, astral, physical. Those are our different energy bodies that we hold. And the monadic wraps all of the other 6, right? It's in between, it fills all the spaces, it's everywhere. So that's the energy of the 7th seal. And that 7th seal, the way that the seals open is actually in reverse. So the 7th seal is the first seal that opens. And I really cannot tell you enough how much I recommend listening to the 7th seal. It is free. It is available through Gene Keys for everyone to listen to. And it will totally rock your world if you're ready to hear it. So that 7th seal is grace, which is what we need, right? Grace is what starts all of this. I love to think that I'm the one that's changing you or that I'm the one that changed myself. I've learned enough to know that that's not the truth. It's whatever's playing through me and whatever's playing through you. And it is this divine grace that is guiding us towards our Dharma on this planet, both at an individual level and a planetary level. Once that grace touches us, then we start to see the truth. We start to see God in everything. Once we know the truth, then we can forgive. I can forgive you because I know that you're enacting your part of the plan. I know that I was enacting my part of the plan. Once I forgive, that opens me to the epiphany of love. It creates the ground that allows grace to open our hearts with a flood, with an explosion, and totally changes how we operate and see in the world. And the epiphany is the 3rd seal, love. And we begin to embody that and show up in everything that we do. And by being loving, we begin to open into that omniscience. We begin to see that it's everywhere, that it's in everything. That the same thing that's in me is in you, and therefore I know you on a deep, deep, deep level. And then finally, we open into divine will. We become this clear channel where divine will can do the work that it needs to do in the world. So that is the story of the 7 sacred seals. Are there any questions on first on line 6? And then we'll go back from there. But any line 6 comments? Okay, and then in that case, also with what I just went through with 7 sacred seals and or just anything at large. Yes, my dear.
Oh, sorry, this is Mary. I had to call in, so I don't know how to raise my hand.
You're okay.
So
I got
sorry
you.
to jump in.
What you got?
Hey, so it's super interesting. You know, it's funny. I'm a line 6, which I'm like almost embarrassed to say because when you talk about annihilation and stuff, but I definitely can see like I sometimes shut down, and like particularly, you know, these days with I don't know, so many things going on in our world. And so I think of the poem, like, what I forget what is, if they gave a war and nobody came. I think that's the one that's where a lot of, you know, good people do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question is it kind of like you get more apathetic? Like, I don't know, it's so overwhelming. Can I make a difference? Is that what it was one of my questions around 6, but I also resonate with 3. And I would just say, like, the choice of words, which I don't think this is exactly what you meant about my life is in shambles. It's more of like, I feel like I just took a hard pass. I look at like, oh, why did like some of my friends stay at the same company forever, but I jump around. I make it so much harder for myself. So this resonates with me because I guess I'm supposed to be doing that. But I just wanted to mention those 2 things, particularly if I'm understanding the apathy.
Yes.
Thought the right way.
That's a great word for it. Absolutely. It's absolutely this sense of apathy, this sense of like, well, it's fucked and there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm just going to kind of be over here, and I can see all the drama and all the stuff that you guys are doing. And I can probably even see, and on some level, how to fix some of it, but it's too big. And I can't deal with it.
Okay. And I do have one more question. Sorry. And then how did you go through all the lines, but I'm still a little confused of how my gene key then, because I get the lines and I think of it like generically, but then I think of my key, which is like expectation, detachment,
celebration.
Is it celebration? Yeah. And how does that layer in with the lines? And then I'll just go, I don't know how to go back on mute. So I don't know if you.
I can mute you.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
So yeah, I'll mute you now. Don't forget. So the expectation, right? So, and this is the case for all of your profile when you're looking at the gene keys and the line keynotes. And this becomes a skill that you'll develop as you contemplate more deeply. But what you're looking for is a way to combine the 2 to tell yourself a story. And your story might be different from my story. So it's important that you do this contemplation, right? I don't know your life history. I don't know your story. I can't tell you what the specific connection is that you've been through. But what I can tell you is that there is a connection between the 2. And I used to think that the gene key in a specific sphere was flavored by the line, meaning like the gene key was the main thing to express, and the line kind of tainted that or tinted that in a certain direction. But as I've sat with this wisdom more, I actually am able to see the lines more prominently. And then the gene key flavors the line. So that's just an interesting, again, contemplation or way to think about this. And once you know the lines on a deep, deep level, which if you haven't watched, I have a video for every single sphere and what the 6 lines are in each of those spheres. As you take that in, you will be able, I don't need to see somebody's profile to know what line they are. And, you know, like I can just see in that moment what somebody is because of their actions, because of these lines. So in your case, Mary, we've got at a lower frequency, we've got separation and expectation. And literally you just said it, right? You expect that you're not going to be able to fix the problem. And so you separate yourself out, right? It's that simple. It's like, how can I combine these things in a way that tells the story of my life? And once you see it, you have these like aha moments where all of a sudden it makes sense. So that's just an example of how I potentially see it. That may or may not resonate for you, but that's an example of how to work with it. Carol, you were the next one up, my dear. You are still muted.
It was in connection with the 7 seals, and I wasn't quite sure because you went kind of fast. You've got
did,
the monadic. Monadic, if I got the correct, atmic, buddhic, causal, astral, mind, and physical.
Reverse, mental, and
Mental,
astral.
sorry.
Yeah,
Mental.
so going up, it's a little bit easier to do it forward. So we start at our physical body, which obviously we're all familiar with. And then we've got our astral or emotional body. And then we've got our mental body or our thought pattern or thinking. And then we've got our causal body, which is the heart mind, right? Connecting the heart mind, the soul. And then we've got the Buddhic body, which line 2 and 5 have a resonance. So the Buddhic body is like the emotional body of God, right? It's this like intense, blissful, everything is connected body. And then we've got the Atmic body, which is divine mind, which is analogous to truth. And then finally, the monadic body encases it all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll need to let that sink in, but yes, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm actually going to do a teaching on this soon. So I don't know if it'll be a YouTube video or it'll be here, but that's rolling around in the back of my mind. So it's coming. Renee, you are the next one up.
Hello again. So
Hello.
Jay, what I love about the Gene Keys too is that, like, I think there's no right or wrong way to do this, right? We both agree with that. So what's nice is when I heard your introduction, like not saying introduction, how you did the lines. Well, let me just tell you this. So mine was the opposite. Like I started with the book, the Gene Keys, and actually read the whole book. You know, it takes time to absorb that. Then of course the profile piece. But I do a lot of, I mean, sometimes I've read them 4 and 5 times, but it's actually my passion. It's a big part of my day, you know. I work too, believe it or not, full time. But anyway, and then when I started the lines, it just connected. You know what I mean? I'm just sharing that as another way or experience. So I didn't start with the lines. I'm not saying you started with the lines either. Yeah. But as I started reading my profile, somehow, and I have a guiding system, somehow I got introduced to the love book, the Venus sequence. Anyway, so to make a long, it's amazing how this whole thing, you're guided through it too. It's almost like I didn't have a teacher, but as I, you know, contemplated, which is my thing too. I'm not like into meditation or yoga or deep breathing, even though those all are helpful. I'm a contemplator, but I'm like 4, 5, and 6. Most of my lines are that too, right? So it made sense for me because I'm older. I'm 61. So it's like, 'cause at one time it's like, oh my God, it took me this long. And then when I started reading the lines help with that piece, like, okay, that makes sense now. Yeah, totally. It kind of starts putting so many things together with life, you know, everything actually. So it's a beautiful experience. So I really appreciate you, Jay. And I really am so grateful that you are doing these YouTube videos and taking the time to have these type of wisdom calls as well.
Thank you, my dear. Yeah, you're welcome. To speak to Renee's point here. There's so many different ways into this wisdom, and my way is not your way. And even the people that I work with on a deep level, like we all are doing very different things because it's different for everybody. So first and foremost, follow your intuition. As we spoke about earlier, there's lots of different ways. There's the Delta program, there's the dream arc, there's the sequences, there's the book, there's so many different paths. And so I just encourage you to follow your intuition and follow your inner guidance. Keisha, to you.
Hi again. Well, I really wish I had a better way of articulating what all just came together during this whole thing, because and it happens every single time, and it's this amazing picture that unfolds and all these pieces come together, and then I feel like I have a very difficult time articulating the magic of all of it. But I guess I will say, since we ended with this 6, I'm a 6-2 also. And so, and I have the 1 in the vocation or in the core. And when I think about what you were saying with 6s, and I might have misunderstood this, 6s kind of the separation and thinking that it's not our problem because we're separate.
Mm-hmm.
I started with the gene, diving into the gene keys a couple years ago, and I feel like I'm super blessed that I incarnated this time onto the planet, knowing always that God is within me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a quantum healing hypnosis practitioner, and so after about 100 sessions or so with people, I started realizing that part of the reason I was drawn to the work, that type of work, is because people come to me because they want to know that find God.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't really understand how much of a gift that was, that I am truly blessed through nature and all the time I spent in nature growing up. That I just always had that belief within me. And so 600 plus sessions later, it's like become very clear to me that that is what most people are searching for.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's almost like, because you said something that so it's that separation that doesn't really resonate with me, because I have such a deep trust that literally God is within every single thing that exists, that that was the thing that made me feel separate from the world, but I didn't quite know what it was. And so I guess I will also say that I'm a glass blower, and I work by myself for 22 years in my glass shop. And so I have a lot of time to contemplate these things. And so it's not until I found the gene keys where all of this started to be able to have an actual language that I feel that I can, because now I've brought it into my quantum healing work, and it's amazing the difference that it makes. It's such an easy way to have actual words to explain the things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the pearl, something that you said in one of your videos, where the pearl for me is the 22. And I think about the grace that literally just has happened. It just is apparent in I just do things that have, I know when to just do things.
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like it's always been this, I'm getting so sidetracked, but
Okay.
I think that as a 6, ending with the 6, the thing that I think about is this deep trust in knowing that God is within everything,
Mm-hmm.
does oftentimes cause a feeling of separateness also, which is kind of the opposite, I think, of just thinking, oh, everything, it's not my problem kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, but it's also, I hear you. I feel the same way often, right? Because it's a separateness in, I feel this, how can they not?
Yeah.
Right. And
Mhm.
in that way, we're still separating ourselves.
Yeah. I didn't realize until I'm 50. I didn't realize until I was 35, probably 38, maybe 40 even, that the whole world doesn't see these things.
Yeah.
I just made this assumption that everybody knew that God was within everything.
Yeah.
And it took me most of my life to realize, and especially with the quantum healing work, that, wow, like most people actually don't know this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I have the fifth line in the attraction 50. I have the 55-5 in my attraction.
Man, what a profile.
Yeah. Yeah. The individuation line, that, like, that's what I was thinking about during this talk, is like the path of individuation, and how that, it was with the fifth line when you were talking about guilt. And for me personally, I think about these people that I attract into my office with my work.
Mm-hmm.
And I would feel guilty for a long time that these people are paying me money. And I feel like I'm literally having like people come to me to teach me the most amazing things ever. And they obviously keep coming back because they get a lot out of coming to see me also. But the guilt for me in that attraction sphere was that, is like, wow, like I'm actually getting paid money to do this.
Yeah.
And they're coming, they have no idea what they're giving me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just reflect back to you that I feel the same way. There's a couple of people that are on the call that I work with, and I'm like, I don't like, I grow, I learn, I get the most beautiful relationships and exchanges, and it's like, it's amazing. So I totally understand. And I'm like, how is it, how is it so easy? And how am I getting, like, it's, and that's a very different experience from the earlier part of my life, you know?
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to speak into here is, Richard, I really think a lot of people see the gene keys as a system that helps you understand yourself. And one of the things that I got from Richard is that he made it very clear that the purpose of the gene keys is to get you to believe that there is a God that is looking out for you so that you can take a deep breath and serve the whole.
Mm.
It's not about the profile. Like, I could see this as a sixth line. I'm like you, right? I can just kind of feel, see, know things that are happening. I can just see when people ask, and there's nothing wrong with this. And Carol, maybe you can mirror this for me, but when people asked about like very specific things around timing and profile, like I could just see the, like, it doesn't matter. You're missing the point. And so, yes, I agree. That's the whole shebang. Once we have that, not just belief, right? This knowing. One of my favorite quotes is a Jung quote, and he was being interviewed, and the interviewer was like, so it sounds like that means you believe in God. And Jung's response was, I don't believe, I know.
Mm-hmm. I
And
know
that is
very
a
well.
very different feeling, right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing, Keisha.
Mm-hmm.
Carol, over to you.
Thank you. It's going back to this sixth line about the indifference.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that from your perspective, that we don't feel compassion because we are separate.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when I see things going around, either to animals, to the planet, to people, to societies like wars, etc., or injustice or oppression or anything like that, I feel the trauma and I find it overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it too much. And sometimes I have to step back, deal with that, how I feel, before I can look at it with any clear perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I can only deal with a certain amount. And I feel helpless because of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that resonates for me as well. I agree. That's another way that that sixth line can manifest 100%. It's like so deep that it's like, I can't do this right now, God, and I need to look over here. Like, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Well, then we will bring this one to an end. Thank you all for being here. Next one is in 2 weeks. Love to see you there. We're going to keep it in this format. I may or may not do a teaching every time, but we're going to keep it in the Gene Keys realm every time instead of kind of spreading out wide. And my intention is to do a teaching for the most part, most times. So the next one is 2 weeks from today. That is the 19th of December. Still have 2 spots in my deep work that are open. So if that calls to you, let me know when I send an email. Monica asked, how do we apply the seals to the wounding? So as I said, those seals are the involutionary current that is reaching down to help us. So all we need to do is open the space and believe that we're getting help. And then from there, grace does its work. So there's nothing you need to do other than tuning in to love and grace that allows those seals to help you in your process. Carol, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I really like how you call me ma'am. You, an American thing. You don't.
It's
call
a
people ma'am.
it's a Marine Corps thing. That's what it
Is
is.
it okay? Oh, it's a Marine Corps thing. Okay. You said that the involution current is to help us. I'm just thinking because we in the mandala of the Star Pearl, the new course, and the 3 new gene keys. Those gene keys, is my understanding that those will help our evolution.
Agreed. Yes, I also got that understanding. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the one of the things that was new, a lot of what was there wasn't new. What I've been telling people is it's like the difference between listening to live music and listening to Spotify, right? Like that was the feeling that I got from it. But the Star Pearl is coming. It looks absolutely incredible. I highly recommend that you do it. I'm certainly going to be doing it. And it adds 3 more spheres to your Pearl sequence, and it breaks down involutionary and evolutionary currents. There's also a questionnaire, if you will, an assessment is a better word here, that you take. And so this is the first time, and I absolutely love this. Those of you that know me know that I have a hard time with the astrology side of Gene Keys. Well, now they're like the Enneagram. There are questions that you answer on a psychological level that tie into the process, which I absolutely love. And it helps you to decide, those questions help you to decide where it is you should focus your attention, basically. It's really, really interesting. And what we end up with is the pearl at the center, and then we have these 6 points around the outside. And when you're totally balanced, you see this energy of the pearl start to open up. So it's like, it's a very cool process. I really, really recommend it. If you're going to sign up for that, don't worry. I know I said earlier I have the link. I can't do that with Star Pearl, so just go and sign up for it. But anything else, let me know. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you all for being there, and I'll talk to you next time.